Appreciate folks joining us. I'll put everybody on mute in a second, but besides Bill Truth, do we have anybody else that's new with us today? Just wave.
I am.
Hi, George. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York. I live in Nassau County and down in Long Beach.
Oh, okay. Well, Bill and I were originally from Baldwin.
Oh, okay. 15-minute drive.
Yep. And Carlos, where were you? You were Garden City or something? Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah,
I'm
Carlos and
Comac.
Bill. A couple of us were all at the same Boy Scout camp, and then we had. I saw somebody. Vicky knew.
Yeah, I'm new.
Where are you from?
Forest Hills,
Oh,
right
okay.
near the fair.
Real close by.
Yeah, walking distance.
Well, great. I'm going to put everybody on mute. Appreciate folks joining us, and have a lot of pictures to go through today. Originally, I was going to do the construction and demolition, and then realized I had more pictures of just the construction than we will ever get through. So what I'm going to try to do today is race through some of these for the general thing, and then I have several different albums if we still have time. I have one album of nothing but Carousel of Progress photos that were taken by the company that actually built the pavilion. I had another huge set of photos by a guy that helped put the roof on the New York State Pavilion. So we see how well we get here time-wise. So I'm going to jump in here, share a screen. This should do it. Okay. And it's the shared window closed. Well, that was different. Okay, let me try this again. Technology is just so wonderful at times. All right, now I'm going to go back here. Share screen. Share. Okay, there we go. All right, we're going to start back in 1940. The 1939-1940 World's Fair has been taken down, and the fair has run out of money. They were originally going to build this into a wonderful park, the grandeur only to be matched by Central Park, and they didn't have the money to tear out the roads, the pavement, the sidewalks, all sorts of things, and all the underground utilities are still in there, which is one of the reasons why the fair came to be where it is today. So the fair ended. The park was a real wasteland. It was not really used much over the years. This was the original marker for the time capsule, a black marble cylinder here that was left. There were certain things that were left in the park during the demolition phase. They tended to leave things like towers in place so that the construction or demolition crews could find their way around. This was the Poland Pavilion. There were plans to relocate that tower, and it never came to be, but the statue is now near Central Park. There were some buildings they thought about saving for a while. The Temple of Jewels, it was eventually torn down. This was the Bud Wind Vane. Bud was the big builder of railroad cars. They built this giant aluminum wind vane, and it stayed in the park until the construction began on the '64 World's Fair, and they unceremoniously issued a contract to topple it, cart it away for scrap metal, and it's unfortunate that they didn't save it. But those little structures had been there for years. The Bud structures were used as picnic shelters. They even left the Japan Pavilion, thinking it would be a wonderful gift from the government of Japan to the city of New York. After Pearl Harbor happened, people decided that they would rather burn the building down and show Japan what they thought of it. Star Pylon, another piece of the thing that fair was left there. Another view of the time capsule. We're in 1958 now. The park has been sitting there decaying over time. There's not an awful lot of interest in it. Newspaper articles talk about how the place is overrun by muskrats and other animals. And this was the view of, again, the park. Not a lot of people, some people going over to the old amphitheater. But this was the shape of the park. The sidewalks were all in bad shape. Everything was decaying. And Robert Moses was very frustrated his dream park had never come to be. The flagpole, the Flushing River. And this is where the Unisphere had been, where the Triana Perisphere had been, and where we will eventually see the Unisphere. So things changed in 1959 when it was announced that we were going to get a World's Fair. There had been a lot of competition. Chicago was trying to get it. Baltimore was trying to get it. A number of cities were getting it, but President Eisenhower was convinced that they should throw the support behind the New York application for the Bureau of International Expositions, and work began on getting the World's Fair going. There was originally a lot of talk about putting it in Staten Island because Staten Island had a lot of empty land. They could go off and remodel it. But back at this point in time, if folks remember, the only way to get to Staten Island was by ferry. And there was plans to try to get the Verrazano Narrows Bridge built, but what if it wasn't built in time? What if nobody could get to the fair? So they decided, since Staten Island was too hard to get to, they had this half built out park area in Queens. Let's hold the fair there. And that's why you'll see a lot of similarity between the layouts of the fair. We have the 39 fair on the left, of course, the 64 fair on the right. And you can see the same design of fountains, the same design of the streets, all that sort of thing. Because again, all the underground utilities were left in place. You had the gas lines left there. You had water lines, electric lines, that sort of thing. So there's a big reason that the two of them had the same layout. This is the 1961 site plan. Not a lot of places being sold or rented out, but again, the sort of plan that we're getting to familiar with. We've gone through the last couple of weeks in depth of the various areas. This is an early model that they built of what they thought the fair should look like. The idea was, let's build this giant circular ring here, and then all the nations could just have a small piece of that pie and not have to build their own massive pavilions to go around it. It was interesting. That's the same sort of concept we used for a while for Epcot, trying to look at it, for building one giant set of pavilions. And the idea was one guy could have 10 square feet of or linear feet of opening, and another guy could have 100 square feet, and then that would let you have your pavilions inside. But next to nothing survived on this design other than Shea Stadium up there, which at that point was supposed to be a totally round stadium, and there was talk about putting a roof on it. So this is a model room at the World's Fair headquarters. It was a very elaborate model that they used to help show dignitaries where their pavilions would be if they came in to sponsor it. This is a very early view of it. You can see not a lot of things on the World's Fair on the model. A closer look, you have the New York City Pavilion still sitting there, showing where Shea Stadium is going to be, the amphitheater, the Unisphere, and a lot of the empty space ready to be rented out. And this is how big the whole model is. Most of it never showed in the pictures because people went off and focused on the part where all the pavilions were, but it came all the way down to not just Meadow Lake, but also Willow Lake, because again, it was a big concept to redevelop this entire area into a master park for Queens. This is the original design of the fair. Everybody thinks about the Unisphere. It was actually the theme structure was to be the giant head. The theme structure was always looking ahead, not the peace and understanding. No, obviously just kidding. The Unisphere is popped out of the center here. That's so people could reach in from down below and move the other pavilions around. Albert Fisher took this picture of one of his co-workers sticking their head up and being a silly guy, but it was just such a silly picture, I just had to throw it in. Here's a picture of some of the VIPs all coming to look at it. More of the pavilions have been put out on the map there. Fellow with the bow tie is Mike Pender. He was the director of the state exhibits there at the fair. Mike worked at the fair during the construction, the operation, and the demolition. And a lot of the things people have in their collections today actually survived because Mike was a real pack rat. When they would take a pavilion off the model because they had either decided not to exhibit or to change the design of it, rather than throw it away, Mike would put it into a box. So all sorts of little models and bits and pieces of the fair have shown up because of Mike. I've got my Avenue of Progress street sign. Others have others that Mike was able to save. So we owe Mike a real vote of thanks for what he did for us collectors. President Kennedy coming to visit. You've got Mayor Wagner just off to his side. And by now, a lot of the pavilions that we've got to know are in place on the fair. He's taken a look at it, and they're again, talking to them about how excited they are that the US government is going to be participating in such a big way. Again, Mike Pender off to the left on this. Here you have the governor of Oklahoma, a representative of the governor of California, General Potter, who is the man basically in charge of actually building the fair. And then it fell off to the right is aide to one of the governors. You can start seeing some changes here from the fair that we know to the fair that was initially designed. In particular, look just to the right of the General Motors Pavilion, and you can see the Travel and Transportation Pavilion looks quite different than it was actually built out. We'll see more of that. They would also take pictures of the model, right in where they were going to put different things, send them off to the various exhibitors, convince them that they'd like to sign a lease. So Louisiana will give you this great space here on the model. And these are some of the little models, again, ones that Mike Pender was able to save over the years as they would pull them on or off the fair. Enough detail on it that you could definitely tell that's the RCA Pavilion at the bottom left. Others you could start looking around, see Coke up ahead. But this is the sort of detail that the model was built to. They also started a big effort at this point in time to let people know where the fair was actually going to be. Because if you told most people it's going to be in Queens, they might know where that is. But if you told them it was going to be in Flushing Meadows Corona Park, they would have absolutely no idea. So they started putting out all sorts of charts and graphs and things trying to publicize where it was going to be. This is showing how they're building all the new roads that were going to be required to get all the millions of people coming into the fair. And again, how they helped justify it as the billion-dollar fair because of the money spent on all the highways. Okay. And now work begins in earnest. 1961, they go out and one of the first things they have to do is take all that stuff that was buried in the ground from the 39-40 fair and find out how much of it is reusable because it was never intended to be reused. So they had to go and retrench a lot of the sewer lines, check the water lines to make sure they weren't leaking after that point in time. So they brought in some heavy construction equipment and started digging up the old site. And you can imagine how many things they probably came across as they were digging through and found remnants of the prior fair. But this, again, unseemly view is right smack dab in the heart of the fair. You can see one of the pile drivers starting to do soil testing and stuff in the back. And they were bringing in dirt from all over the New York area because, again, we know this area is very marshy, had not been maintained during the 25 years from the last fair. So they had to bring a lot of stuff in to try to compact the soil again and to get it going. This is an example. These are all pictures that were in the New York World's Fair Corporation files that they threw away that Mike Pender saved that I was able to get from his son. This one is showing that they're bringing in sanitary fill from across the New York City to try to put into the ground. So this is when you go to the Flushing Meadows today or when you went to the World's Fair back in '64, this is what you were walking over were miles and miles of rusty tin cans. There is no truth to the rumor. This is not Joey Vento's backyard. It is the fair in '61. Then they had big ceremonies for major events. In this particular one, we have 992 days coming up to the opening of the fair. What all these people are out there watching is the burying of the Flushing River so they could put it in underground conduits and start shaping the fountains of the fairs that we know today. And Robert Moses getting his picture taken, as happy as ever out there. There's one of the World's Fair flag poles that was left from the '39 fair, the big black and white pole off next to Mr. Moses. And then work went on at a feverish pace. They had signed all sorts of contracts with the unions to try to get this thing done without strikes. Even without strikes, you had a lot of issues to deal with. This subject of the ground having to be taken care of. You also had certain times of the year you just couldn't work. If it was too rainy, too cold, it made it very hard to get work done on the site. So in this particular case, they're burying new sewer lines for the fair. Work is going on, and it went on pretty much around the clock in some of these jobs to get it done. Looking across at the amphitheater, we're about where the Valentine Pavilion had been for the '39 World's Fair. Between fairs, it had been used as a local swimming area. It had also been used for some stage productions. You can see some of this stuff left out on the stage out there. more trucks just hauling dirt in like crazy. Another ceremony, Shea Stadium was having its groundbreaking, and it was supposed to be opening in 1963. They ran into construction delays, and it did not open on time, but not a big surprise. Other things they would do, they would bring out models of the pavilions, then they would have groundbreaking ceremonies. So here's a really spectacular model of the Tower of Light. They have all these really genuine official shovels that each of the VIPs would turn a shovel of dirt and be able to take a souvenir shovel home with them. Looking across at the New York City Pavilion, we're over across the highway now. You can see the highway's nowhere near as big and fancy as it is today. If you look over to the left, there's a tower. You can see a set of stairs going up to a tower. That tower is in the dead center of where the Unisphere would eventually go, and it was where they did all the master surveying out of, so that everything would be based on its relationship to where that tower was at the fair, so they could try to figure out where on earth things would be built and put in during the time of the actual construction. They did a lot of work that people don't take into account. In this particular case, there were steel pylons that they were using here to drive into the ground, and they wanted to make sure what sort of weight they could hold. So they put them up on blocks, and they put more blocks on top of those, and kept stressing these things to see whether or not the issues would deform or not. And let me just admit somebody in the waiting room. Oh, God, I'm great. President Kennedy came back. He came back for the groundbreaking in the United States exhibit. Kind of a cold and nasty day out there. A lot of people dressed up, but being president, he went for the tough route. Then we get into the next issue, which is, okay, we've got a lot of work underway, and we've got to get into the design phase of this. So here's an early look at the Unisphere. Harper Goff did the artwork on this. A lot of people know him as the designer of the Nautilus or Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was brought in as a freelance artist for this particular project or this phase of the fair, trying to sell people on why you would do an exhibit at the fair. And in this particular case, you can see there were statues, different zodiac signs that were going to be scattered around the Unisphere. Other artwork that we got to know, some of it has been well publicized and other odds and ends over the years. Another one of Harper's concept, Astral Fountain. They were trying to sell the United Nations and having a major project off to the side. I apologize for that little green squiggle that somehow ended up on the screen. Something got drawn on somehow. Again, this takes that last picture and shows how the Fair Corporation would frame these. They would give them away to VIPs. They would hang them in offices. They would do all sorts of things to use the concept art to get people to participate in the fair. Amazing artwork, which I don't know if any of it survives in reality today. In some cases, you had pavilions that their artwork looked very familiar with what we got to see. So I really particularly enjoyed how sparkling and clean the lines of the NCR artwork are here. And the actual pavilion looked very much like what the original artwork looked like. Mexico, again, very nice artwork. And the pavilion built the way it was built out. Some things didn't turn out the same. You had the AMF monorail, did not look anything like the monorail that we actually did get. I think the one we did get was a lot nicer, sleeker looking. Some things, you had Thailand, it looked like a nice airy open space. The amount of space they actually had available to them turned up to be smaller, so we ended up with a more compact pavilion with a different design. Some just didn't work out at all. This was the early design for the Central American Pavilion, going to be a massive pavilion built around a Mayan temple sort of motif. It was going to be very big, very expensive. They decided that that was more ambitious than they had the budget for. So let's take it down to a smaller pavilion. It was going to be, again, more eye-catching. They didn't have the budget to build this, so they eventually ended up building this. And that happens a lot. It's very easy to sketch things out, not as easy to come up with the banker's interest to build them out. And we'll see that a number of times. Sometimes you had companies come up with designs that they just thought would not work for one particular reason or another. I'll show you the final pavilion in a moment, but this was one design for a major American company that they had worked on. They then changed it and said, oh, this would be a much better design for our pavilion. This is the one we'll build. And in reality, this is the one they built. Those were two early designs for DuPont. So it's kind of fun as you go through the old files to see what they looked at, what they abandoned, and try to figure out why some of the things came to be and others not. Design here, we can see some people in African garb dancing. This was going to be the African Pavilion. And it ended up, of course, being a totally different design, doing more of a tent-like structure. The brass rail restaurant design, this was pretty much what we got to have underneath, but these are not particularly eye-catching. Nothing really draws your eye to it. It's just a snack bar, a bunch of tents over to it. They had gone off and started publicizing this as the design of the snack bar, and then somebody luckily had the better idea that, hey, let's put the giant bubbles up on top. It will everybody know how to find your nearest hamburger and hot dog. And they popped up all across the fairgrounds. Some things didn't work out. You had the Marina of the Future was going to be a very modern looking design out there. They went through a couple designs. This is out in the bay. Overhead view here, you could see that circular design for the marina there. We were going to have different type of centers for it. Maybe it was going to be round, maybe it was going to be triangular, maybe we'd have a candela type structure built all along out there. And they ended up building the marina out there pretty much as a traditional marina. The only thing that made it kind of interesting was the little red and white striped structure way at the end there was the fuel dock, and that was later moved to Long Island and became the centerpiece for a restaurant. And again, looking down, a different view of the marina. Very easy, again, to design a building on paper, make it look really spectacular, a 4-story hall of education, all sorts of sculptures outside, fancy artwork on the front of it, very eye-catching design right off of reflecting water and all. This is the little model that Mike Pender took home when they changed the design a bit from it. It came off the top of the model we had seen earlier. And here's the Hall of Education as it eventually got built. So again, design and actual construction sometimes vary. But some things do work out. This is an early design, and people have to, I swear you all to secrecy. You see, this is not to be released. This is the early design for the Greyhound glider ride transport. And another one, super top secret, not to be released, for the Greyhound escorters. Again, pavilions changed over time. We had seen this model out on the big model, the Travel and Transportation and Travel Pavilion. It's going to be a very eye-catching structure. Budget woes kind of came in. They changed it a little bit to a more what we got to know today with the moonscape. And here's how it actually ended up looking as it was built at the fair. The World's Fair Assembly Pavilion, a general purpose pavilion, was going to be built by the Fair Corporation, used for special events like Olympic trials. Going to be a very open air type of A-frame structure. We ended up with the dome that was used first just for the World's Fair Pavilion, and then the Churchill Pavilion in '65. Wisconsin had very elaborate plans for their pavilion, and when they built it, they had to downscale just a little. Same Caribbean, it was going to be a nice open air tent design showing the modern life in the Caribbean today. What we actually had built was more traditional grass thatched huts, tiki torches, that sort of thing. This is kind of interesting. There were some pavilions that just never got built at all. This was going to be the California State Pavilion. And they came up with this artwork showing that they were going to have this nice outdoor theater. You could have a round building full of historical exhibits, a main pavilion, and on the map there showing you right how you're going to be right next to the U.S. Pavilion. So the World's Fair Corporation commissioned this artwork to try to sell the state of California on it. They actually went so far as to build a model of it. Again, go off and show the state of California why you'd like to exhibit. They had all sorts of artwork based on it, again, trying to get more and more people to do it. And the state of California eventually said no, so we ended up with the Hollywood USA Pavilion. But take a look at it again. You have the the California State Pavilion, everything on here, right? So what do you do if you have this piece of artwork that you were trying to sell to somebody and they decided that they didn't want to build their pavilion? You bring in somebody with a jar of whiteout and you turn it into a proposal for the state of Texas, which is now going to be the exact same spot, the exact same shape, the exact same everything. They've just changed the name on it. So Texas did not go with this particular design. For a long time, they were looking at something based around the space age because of the Johnson Space Center and all the work they were doing out there. They eventually decided that they could not compete against the U.S. space park that was being built by the U.S. government, by NASA. So we ended up with the Texas Music Hall total non-space design concept. New York State Pavilion didn't always look the way that we got to know it. Originally, it was designed without the towers, kind of different elevator would take you up to these observation platforms. Governor Rockefeller eventually decided that he wanted his pavilion to be the tallest at the fair, the biggest at the fair, seen from everywhere at the fair. So we ended up with the New York State Pavilion that we all know and love. Florida went through several iterations. This was designed to look like a bunch of sailboats. It was going to be a big marina design there at the center of it. And of course, we ended up with a totally different design for Florida. Some pavilions just never got built at all. This was a set of designs built for the government of Mali, M-A-L-I, and they were looking to build pavilions there. So they had some nice design with floor plans and side views and some artwork that was going to be built. Eventually, they decided they could not participate. This one shows up on a lot of the maps. Matter of fact, the map over my desk here has the American Indian Pavilion. Was going to be a big pavilion in the lake amusement area. Was well mentioned in guidebooks. It was on maps, and it was very close to getting built, and the funding collapsed at the last possible moment. By the way, let me just, if anybody has chats, I'm going to see if I can pull them up here. Okay. Another one that was very close to coming along was the Heartland States Pavilion. They tried several different things to get a bunch of the states from the middle of America to participate. So they had this one particular design. A second design for it, you can see it says Kansas, Nebraska, a few of the other states listed on it. And this is one I particularly got a kick out of. You can see a guy in a jetpack flying up over the building. Down below it says take a rocket belt flight over the west. And this is really interesting because they had the concept that now we use at the Disney parks for soaring. The idea here again was you were going to be in a seat, we were going to go into a giant theater, and we were going to simulate flying over North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. So they never were able to pull it off, but they had the idea of a simulated hang glider type or rocket belt ride they were going to do back then. And these were the little pavilions that were going to be outside the theater where each state would have exhibits. This was a real ambitious one they were looking at building. There's 4 exhibits here showing these various states that all have different mountains together. They obviously are not all looking like this, but this was an interior view, how you would go through the different states and visit them. Inside, you'd have this giant arena around it, state displays. An idea inside showing how it was going to be looking like Carlsbad Caverns, for example, the Grand Canyon, different things that were going to be on there. And this was the outdoors of it. And people said, yeah, it's impossible. You can never build a fake man-made mountain, to which the Fair Corporation said Disney did. So this one was when they put a lot of effort into trying to get these states all to participate, and unfortunately did not come to be, but it shows up on a lot of the plans as coming close to fruition. They tried other things when they realized they were not able to get some of the states to put in a lot of money for big buildings. How about if you all sponsored a garden area? So 4 states could come together for one of the empty tracts of land we have, and you could have a nice garden. That didn't happen to be. The state of Georgia almost came and got a pavilion put together. In almost all of these, the Unisphere is somewhere very much in sight, trying to convince everybody they would get the free prime real estate. Kind of interesting one here, the tire. This is in the transportation area, and the Port Authority ended up with the master planning for the Transportation Authority. So they ended up with the master planning for the Ferris wheel, which they thought somebody had the idea of make it look like a giant tire, which was really a brilliant stroke. So this was one of the earliest sketches we found in the files of the Port Authority. Another idea that they had coming along here for combining the thought of a theme structure. Maybe we could make a Ferris wheel that went around. We could put a world in the center, and then eventually decided to go with the Unisphere as a separate structure. But this was an idea for it. A very abstract thing here. We can see sketch for Ferris wheel scheme. I don't know who this particular artist was, but we found a bunch of his artwork in a file, and he was doing all these rough concepts of pavilions. And that's how we, of course, ended up with the actual design. What's interesting is sometimes you end up with pictures and there's no information on what the pavilion was supposed to be or who was going to be built for. And you have this sort of thing. This pavilion, very nice artwork, and this was from an official Fair Corporation folder. No description whatsoever. Now, this artist that we mentioned before did these freelance sketches, did a couple that are really interesting. You can see this is restaurants up and down. The idea here was that you would go to dinner in a restaurant and it would lift you up into the sky. You'd have your dinner and come back down. So I'll have people guessing if they can try to figure out which pavilion this ended up being. We have restaurants up and down. We have some more ideas of these platforms would lift up into the air. Again, big structure, very fancy. The company did participate at the fair, but not anywhere with a design like this. This was the final design. This was actually a model they built of these restaurants that would lift you up into the air. You can see one of the platforms going up, taking you up to the sky restaurants. And they didn't build this. They instead built that. So real total change of concept, going from a George Jetson type of environment. Rheingold decided that they would go and do something with little old New York. Again, this was the same artist. We have no idea who he was trying to sell what to, but I just thought it was so great, the colors and the shapes, we would just throw it in there and take a quick look at it. Others, this was another proposed design for a theme structure, sort of a UFO looking thing before the Unisphere was decided upon. This was a system called the Carousel. It was going to be a people mover type system. You can see the little cars people were sitting on. You would enter at the main entrance at Gotham Plaza, get on your Carousel. The cars would move along, take you out to the Unisphere and drop you off. You also had a Skyway that was going to be part of the Graphic Arts Pavilion, which never came to be, but they built this little model. And again, this is one that shows up in a lot of the Fair Corporation designs. The World of Food, we'll be taking another look at it later on. This almost came to be. They got to the point they built the steel framework to it. They ran out of money, and when the fair opened, they were rapidly tearing down all the steel, burying the foundation under a sod, and carting the steel work off to a warehouse in Brooklyn because it was right at the entrance of the fair. It was a real eyesore, and Robert Moses just did not want to have the World of Food skeleton sitting there and everybody commenting on it. So he had ordered it torn down. The people that were the sponsors of it were suing him. Fair Corporation eventually won after they had paid the store all the steel out in Brooklyn for several years. But a lot of the vendors in here then had to scramble for space. So a place like Nestle's had been in here. They ended up going over to other pavilions in the Better Living Center and some others. But it would have been a striking pavilion. And now more work gets underway. We put up a sign to let everybody know this is where your World's Fair is going to be. The Fair Corporation starts putting out all sorts of publicity showing things underway. Work is going on in site. Sometimes we had to tear out pieces of the 39th Fair that didn't last anymore, or culverts and that. But this is the fair site in 1962, I believe, or we're going 62, 63. You can see Shea Stadium going up in the background. The pile drivers going around. The lagoon in the center is being shaped up. all around, different people were doing different things. The state of New Jersey was trying to get people interested in coming out and seeing their exhibit. So this was a mock-up they had done of the New Jersey Pavilion, held at an event in New Jersey, trying to get people to come and look at it and get excited about the fair. Backside of the Coca-Cola Pavilion being built. Again, lots of stuff underway. And if you like steel work, this would be the spot for it. This is the bell system being built. You can see that they've built temporary structures to lift the building up. Excuse me. A lot of these, you'll see the name American Bridge, Bethlehem Steel, the various companies that are building these and putting them together. Back out in California, Disney's hard at work. We can guess what this woman is doing. She is posing as a model for the Carousel of Progress. You can see says down below, she's moving a sandbag from the grip department and moving it around. Father is busy reading his newspaper. And these were all pictures that the Disney engineers would use for modeling the AA figures, the audio animatronic figures, as the building was actually built. The boy helping clean up. The daughter who's seen and then disappears in one quick shot. Babs on her weight reducing machine on the phone talking to her girlfriend. Work going on. This is the Van Wyck Expressway. Besides all the work being done for the fair, there was all the work being done to build the roads to get people to the fair. And lots of stuff going on here. And now we're jumping back to the fair site. This is the early construction of General Motors. So they're digging this giant pit, lining with concrete. They called it, I believe, a bathtub at the time. Same structure, name they end up for the basement of the World Trade Center. But this is how massive the General Motors piece of it was below the ground, where they put so many of the working systems, the air conditioning and power systems and all the rest. And tremendous amount of work for something that was going to be used for 12 months and then torn back out. So lots of framing, reinforced rebar, concrete. Oh, my college roommate told me if I made the mistake between concrete and cement, he was going to harass me for it. So they were putting stuff into the ground. Temporary electric systems to power these pavilions during the time that they were being built. We're hopping over to Shea Stadium for a quick look at that going up. When I posted this online, people were saying with all that steel work, they were still amazed how the structure would move when the crowd started stamping their feet in happiness for some of the games. But some great views of early Shea. And we get some aerial views. People like to get a general view of what's going on and where they are. So we're looking now, you've got the lake amusement area over to the right. The amphitheater is still left from the 39 fair. You can see pieces of the highways being built, the Long Island Expressway going up, temporary bridge being built to go from the lake amusement area over to the World's Fair site going across the fair. A lot of these areas have had bridges that were there from the 39 fair. The 64 fair decided that they needed to be rebuilt to be wider so that they were modernizing them at this point in time. And you can see they've had to divert traffic around the bridge construction area. So a temporary little road going off the main road under the bridge and back onto it while they're working on the bridge. They would put out some of them that they were helpful and labeled so you could start telling where things were and making sense of all the giant piles of dirt. They had to take some of the lines because now they were putting more sewer lines and stuff in. They had to take the subway systems and put up new supports so they didn't come down and collapse as they were working on the fair. This one's a little harder to see. I'll zoom in a little, but they started labeling some of the pavilions here so you can start seeing what's going in where. Construction well underway, Fountain of the Planets, Pool of Industry, Bell System. So things were being built nicely here. Again, different view. Some of the pavilions came up very early. Some of them, like GE was one of the first ones that was physically built because I had so much work to do in building out the interior of it. Others were a race to opening day to get the pavilions done. And you can just see between that picture and this picture, about a 6-month window has gone by. We're in dead of winter. You can see the lake is freezing over down below, but more and more of the fair is nearing its time of coming to be. Again, more general construction underway. Highways being built. It was a great time to be a construction worker in New York, that's for sure. And we see the New York State Pavilion going up, the columns going up. We'll get over there and take a quicker or a more in-depth look in just a moment. Shea Stadium. Wouldn't it be great to have a drone back then? During the time all this work was underway, they kept bringing out VIPs and taking them out to the site. Again, here's Mike Pender. You can always tell him with his bow tie. General Potter off to the left, the man who built the fair, and 2 representatives of the state of Montana have come out to see where their exhibit's going to be. So they would do these various things at the fair site. Here is the groundbreaking for the state of Missouri. They're out there having a very nice looking day in the park, giving their speeches. And they've already actually broken ground, but they do come and turn a ceremonial shovel or 2 of dirt. They would then put the VIPs on buses. They would take them around. All sorts of signage was up to let people know where their pavilions were going to be. So in this particular one, you can see where the dinosaurs were going to be. You can see where the Ferris Wheel is going to be. In the back, you can also see how far along the Ford Pavilion was, that the spires are already up on the rotunda. Some cases, if you didn't have a sign, you would have no way of knowing what you were looking at. And that would include things like a pool of industry, because there was no water. You didn't know it was a pool. It was just a giant thing of dirt. In the background, Travelers Insurance is going up. Again, another view of the Bell system. You've got the Bell logo and a big sign with a picture of what it's going to look like. And they're bringing in some more of the steel to put it together. And again, big, massive construction projects. Bell went and hired a photographer to go and take pictures of their pavilion being built the day that they were building the microwave tower. Their photographer also wandered through the site and captured some other really neat views. So here we see the giant IBM egg is coming along nicely. They're starting to put the skin on it. If you look across way in the back, the Unisphere is up, but for the most part, the land masses have not been put on it. GE, as I mentioned, was one of the very early pavilions to be done. It's looking pretty well done here, but needs a lot of work done inside. Amazing amount of work going on all across the ground. The fountains, where all the fireworks are going to be launched and shot off during the fair, and the Bell system going up. Travelers Insurance. If we go over by Ford, these vaults are still there for the transformers that were put in. This is some of the temporary electrical work to allow the fair to be built. And more views of Bell going up. If you're familiar with the Bell system, they had a thing in the center where they had all the logos of the Bell operating companies on this dome. And this is the center of where the microwave tower was going to go. So they poured the concrete, they put all the conduits in, they put all these giant bolts in, and now they're going to deliver the pre-built microwave tower to the site. And is it going to fit? And I sure hope so. So they're bringing it out on a truck. You can see the Jane Parker sign that drove Robert Moses crazy in the back. But this was a big piece of metal. Again, several sections of this that they brought out. And they take it off on the truck with a giant crane. And they bring it over. And boy, is it going to line up. And oh, thankfully it did. And you know that they planned all this stuff out in advance, but it still had to, I imagine, be a tremendous piece of relief when you put this thing down on the ground and the holes and the bolts actually line up. Going inside the Bell System Pavilion, lots of work going on to wire it. Anybody that knows anything about telephone operations would get a kick out of one of the old wiring panels. We're going to take a look at the Heunisphere. Again, early construction of it going on. This was, again, original design for the Unisphere to have fountains that shot out from the rim to hide the base of it. There was even talk of rotating the Unisphere until they decided that was just an impossible engineering task. But they were going to have audience stages built around it, all these signs of the zodiac. They eventually decided to change that. Here's the base going together at the very beginning. More pieces of the Unisphere going up. Right in front of us is the New Jersey Pavilion foundations. More of the Unisphere. Anytime you could put your company's name up on a sign that somebody could get it taken in a picture, so much the better. Is just starting to put the land masses on it. We're going over to New York State. The pylons are going up for the 10th of tomorrow. The tower is just starting to be built, the pylons for the supports for the tower. This one's interesting. If you look down at the bottom of it, there is a kind of rectangular area with a black something sticking up. That was the same marker for the Westinghouse time capsule that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. It had sat there for all those years. And this gives you an idea of how it had been out there. Then they took it out, lost it somewhere in a warehouse during the time since the fair is open. But you can see the theaterama going around, the circular theater being built, and the towers are now being poured in concrete for the observation towers. When they were done, they were covered in plastic so that they could work upstairs in the cold winter. New Jersey off to the right-hand side being built. And again, the mezzanine, everything covered, sheathed in plastic, because it was very, very cold for that winter to get this stuff built. This is the sort of view you might have seen if you were driving along the area. There's the New York State Pavilion going up in the far distance. You look over, that's the Christian Science Pavilion being built, and of course the Unisphere. And just general construction debris, dirt piles, and heaps of everything everywhere. Some great views of the Festival of Gas Pavilion, the Pinkertons making sure that it was safe. And I'm always amazed that you get so much construction debris and material and everything, and it all comes together and opens on time. Early picture of the IBM Pavilion going up. The people wall would slide up that inclined ramp and go up. And there's the theater up area up above where they're all working. And further along, we have the guys with the scaffolding. And there, I imagine the OSHA people would just love to see some of these shots, but getting the pavilion ready for its big day. They've assembled the microwave tower, and then now they're starting to put the outer aluminum cladding on it. But again, just dirt everywhere. We'll hop back over to the lake amusement area, and this is the beginnings of the Florida Pavilion. They've taken the towers up, they're putting the oranges off on this side of it, and they've delivered the giant orange, which is going to go up on top. And you can see from the size of the truck just how big that thing is. It didn't necessarily, look that way when we were down on the ground, but it was massive. And again, shot of it getting ready to go up on the top there. A couple real quick views. We'll just go because, again, showing how hard it was to build this thing during winter. Bell System hired somebody to come out and document the construction of their project. You can see the wooden walkway, which would be submerged to hide the walkway that would go out to the firework launching areas. But this time of year, there's no water out there and everything's frozen. It makes you cold just to think about it, doesn't it? And just flip through these kind of quickly. And this one, Bill Troop would get a kick out of. His father was the vice president of passenger operations for the Long Island Railroad. And you can see part of the Long Island Railroad Pavilion being built there. There's Dashing Dan, the sign off to the left. Windmill, typical representative of the early ones out on Long Island. And then you have the state of Montana having one of their log cabins being built. You can't see much of the future there, but that's the framework for the giant pictures for the Kodak Pavilion. And we have the Vatican Pavilion going up, all sorts of things that were being framed out and set up. The astral fountains in place, ready to go. Well, the picture is kind of in bad shape. It was super overexposed and really ravaged by time. But this shows you what the inside of the US Giant tire looked like, the Ferris wheel. So giant metal mechanism and the Ferris wheel built inside of that. And they're just starting to put the tire pieces on it. The new US Pavilion getting built, we can see the giant staircase in the center that so many people went up and down over the years. The plastic framework, the wall. Originally, this was going to be flat plexiglass, and then they later went to the textured one, which gave it a much more subtle and, I think, interesting look. I keep saying if I had money for a time machine, I think I'd go back and get all the exclusive rights for scaffolding for the New York area for about a 5-year window. Our mail is getting delivered, so please excuse the barking dog. Lake amusement area, they're just hanging the monorails onto the track. More work going on over in that area for Florida. The tower lights going up. Vatican Pavilion, big sign in the back again, put it up there. The Belgian Village is being built. It was running out of money at this point, so it was kind of in abeyance. I mentioned before how Robert Moses liked the head of the Belgian Village, so he did not tear this down like he tore the World of Food down. It was also not next to the main entrance, so he let it stay. And I guess just some general views. We're only a couple weeks away from opening date at this point in time. Very hard to get everything done. There's Africa being finished off to the side. The roads finally are getting paved. The entrance pylon, we're right looking over towards Gotham Plaza. Again, the scaffolding's down. It's hard to believe we're about 6 weeks away from opening day at this point in time. Roads are getting paved. You can see the World of Food, the steel work off to the side that is going to get torn down. The HMS Bounty has arrived at the Marina for its starring role in 1964. Again, monorail is coming together, a whole bunch of them all close together because they're just being assembled. Hollywood, USA. Some of the bridges are done, but the roads getting up to them are not necessarily ready for prime time. It's kind of interesting. The the Chrysler Giant Car is a white car, but I never realized that it was actually built with black, whatever material that they used, and then painted over for it. So people poking out their heads from the windshield up there. And their giant engine was also black. We can see people building the roof of the Moon Dome over at the Transportation and Travel Pavilion. The Ferris wheel going up over to the left. The car ride at Chrysler coming along. Now the Santa Maria has been delivered from the shipyard. It was brought in by trucks, and now they're going to be moving it over to the site where they eventually put it out in the lake. It has no masts on it yet. You can see the boathouse in the background is a remnant from the '39 fair. And just off to the left is the edge of the Sinclair gas station of the future. Dredging still going on in the lake. They're still pulling muck out and trying to shape it. Not long before the fair is going to be opening. Coke Tower, the bell tower going up. All the speakers for the Carillon up there. Almost getting ready to put the signage and everything on RCA. Another view of the Tower of Light. Hopping back and forth from one area to the other, obviously the monorail station. You can imagine how frantic it was trying to get all this done on time. 7-Up. Almost got the tire done. Now, this is interesting. It's the picture of Thailand. They bought all the gold leaf they could find in the New York area and applied all that to the pavilion by hand. So up until literally, I have pictures 3 days before the fair opened that they were going and working on the Thailand pavilion, the gold leaf on it. I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago how it was basically a giant glass building with the facade put over it. You can see the glass section here, the prefabricated sections stacked off to the side. They're going to be assembled and hung over it. Some of them have the gilt leaf put on it, and some of it's still yet to be done. General Electric coming along nicely. This one kind of surprised me. The General Food arches were all bright yellow. I don't know if that was something that they had originally intended to do, and then they repainted white at the last moment or not, but during construction, they were all bright yellow in design. This is kind of interesting job. It's building the Tower of the Four Winds for Disney. This guy gets to get lowered by a crane so you can go and stick things on the top of the poles to make them spin around. So knowing how it can blow out there at Flushing Meadows, I bet that was a very interesting task. Today, of course, you would probably use a cherry picker with a much longer arm or something to get it done. But back then, that guy got to get picked up and down by that giant crane and assemble the Tower of the Four Winds. Again, getting ready for its day in the sun. Ford in the middle of winter. You can see, again, fun to build these things in the middle of winter. A lot of these pavilions did not have heating or air conditioning operating during this point in time. So all the work, if you're in there swinging your hammer, you're going to be swinging it with a pair of gloves or anything. This is the dispatch tunnel for the cars that are going to go out into the Magic Skyway. Painting underway to get backdrops done. And we're almost done with this section of it. We're looking down from the Port Authority at the Chrysler area. Here we're looking over towards the Underground World Home up at the top of the picture. You can see that circular thing about at the 12 o'clock position is the air duct for it. The buildings off to the right are the support buildings and restaurant stuff they had up top. They've just delivered this entire giant fleet of Greyhound buses and escorters up above the top of it, ready for getting the fair to go. The Moon Dome has been built, but not yet contoured, and very close to opening day. And I think that's the last one I have in this section. So let me stop sharing here real quick. It came to an hour. Just by a show of hands, how many people would like to see more pictures of the GE Pavilion being built? And how many people would like to see pictures of the New York State Pavilion being built? Haven't warned people out yet? Okay, let me jump back into this here 1 second.
Oh, you're lime green all of a sudden.
I'm lime green, beats me. Cheap camera. Okay, we're gonna hop over here to GE. And hang on, I need to take this out of full frame mode for a second so I can actually get it. Okay, zoom in, share screen. Okay, this was a set of pictures that came from Welton Beckett, the architects and Turner Construction actually built the building. Some of them are in order, some of them kind of bounce around, but we'll skip through them sort of quickly because there's some other neat ones to go. But showing how they're putting the roof on this. Again, they had this giant metal structure up there that they put the lights on, and then underneath you had the panels that would actually do the glowing of it. So underneath all these plastic panels, they're got all the lights that GE is going to light up. GE, you turn and you go through the pavilion on a giant set of railroad tracks that the theaters actually rotate around. So we're upstairs up under the roof. It's winter time, snow all over the place. And again, we kind of bounce around in some of these pictures, but you can get an idea of the date here. So 1963. And we're going to go inside. We're looking up at the top of the building now. This is where the giant thing was down below was the fusion generator, and up ahead was where Disney did the Sky Dome Spectacular. So this was a giant movie screen that they're filling in doing the plaster work to show that. And again, this is one of the theaters where you're going to go around and be seen, see the carousel figures actually operate. Just craziness. You know, within a year, this thing's open, everything's up and running, but they're still jackhammering concrete to put in conduits, doing all sorts of work to get this thing done. So July, we're moving ahead. It's coming along nicely. Putting the escalator in so the guests can actually get inside and go and enjoy it. And this, again, they jumped ahead. This is the same area. This is under construction, and now the escalator is in place and operational and going. And how it looked at night, same general area. Model that they had built to show how it was going to all look when it came together. And this is what it looked like inside, just craziness. This is the center of the building where all the foundations for the stages are going to be. Again, people remember the stage doesn't move, the audience does. So this is where all the audio animatronic stuff would get installed in this section in here. This is the ramp that would take you from the final theater, would take you upstairs to where the Sky Dome Spectacular was. And again, we've built now the track work, which is going to go around, but before you can put seats and everything down on it, you've got to put a floor in. So you've got the steel framework and these beams sitting on railroad wheels and axles, and we're putting floors in that are going to be built out. They had a fascination, I guess, this day with escalators. The center of this area is being poured into concrete. This is right where we're going to see in this area the Sky Dome Spectacular. The generator is going, the fusion generator is going to be at this pit here. Again, more views of building the ride, the theater area. So the theater, the figures are going to be off to the right, where you can see some jackets hung and some wood stacked up, and the audience is going to be where the guy is sitting on the steel support beam. Whoops, sorry, I moved a little quick there. Again, the escalator that takes you upstairs to their product area. This is what made the dome, the GE dome light up. I've mentioned before how it was a tremendously large computer system. This is it. They tried to sell this for a surplus after the fair, didn't get a buyer for it, but this is the control mechanism that lit up the light patterns and swirling colors up on the roof. And besides, obviously, being a computer control, it had to have some very powerful electrical switches in it. You can see the conduits coming in for that. The jet fusion generator is going to be down below where those windows are. Again, building out the theaters. The names on the building, it must be coming close to opening day. And we're actually about 6 months away. And now you can see they've started numbering the theaters so they could tell each of the theaters what was going to go in there. The audience area has been pretty much covered over in wood, so it's safe to walk on. And they're starting to get ready to build out the details of it. Upstairs, the product area, mentioned when we did the industrial a couple of weeks ago, pictures of the fusion stuff, the jet engines, toasters, and all the other things they did. Up at the Sky Dome Spectacular, putting the lean rails in so everybody can wait and get ready to see the show up above and not fall over as you're bending over backwards to look up. The ramp that takes you up there. And the theaters are coming together. You're starting to put walls in between the theaters. We're starting to get the stage area underway. Back down to the Sky Dome. This is downstairs entrance area where you would see a sign, 45-minute waiting. The wall off to the left, a giant electronic billboard telling you the wonders of GE. Up above, the Disney guys are now getting busy. They're installing all these projectors that will go up on this Sky Dome. More of the industrial exhibits going in. just think of all the tile work and the mosaics that went in putting this thing together for something that was, people walked right by to go see the main show. Theater 4 is coming along nicely. We built up the wall between theaters. So the floor is all in. We can see, again, they really went for the Sky Dome. But, and they've even put a big sign up here so everybody knows what it's all about. And we'll flip again sort of quickly because we got a lot more. If you're going to put a whole bunch of theater seats in a theater, first thing you do is you go and you lay out where all the seats are going to be. So there's the sides of them, the backs are stacked up along the side. And then, hey, pretty soon we have a theater. It's going to go around, starting to come to be. And now the Imagineers can come in and start putting the figures up on the stage. Downstairs, the entrance area. And again, just all sorts of crazy pandemonium as it's all put together. Up here, this is again where we're going to show you electric irons and toasters and all sorts of things. Now the Sky Dome has a roof on it. We've seen that machine before with its giant electrical blast. This is the exit theater, the one that has the ramp that goes up above. And the figures and the turntables are being put in place for the figures to come and turn around. And the kitchen scenes are being put together. And again, not very long before opening day, you figure the fair was going to be open 2 months from now. And there's a tremendous amount of work to be done getting this thing up and running just two short months away from now. Upstairs, again, the guys are going crazy getting all their projectors in. You can just see looking across this picture just how many projectors. They're all the way in the back there. You can see some of them. Now the names going up on the tile work. Again, this is down below the entrance we had seen earlier. More signage in the cell area. Theaters are coming along nicely. It's only 1 month away from opening day. And the turntables are in place, the figures are in place, everything is being tested. They still haven't put things like the scrims on the turntable because they're still going on and off them all the time. But in just a couple weeks time, people are going to be sitting here enjoying. His father takes us on his tour of electricity. In case you ever wondered how you ever ran the pavilion, you had very small offices squeezed into any spot you could get. This is where the GE folks all operated it from. And that's the end of that one. So let me get out of that. Stop share. And I've got these others we'll go through real quick here. A fellow named Carl Baker's dad worked on the World's Fair, and he had a great job that he worked on the New York State Pavilion. And he was kind enough to let Billy Young and myself work on a number of the pictures, use a number of his pictures for the second book that we did on the World's Fair. I restored some of them for him, and we'll take a look at some of these others here. Okay, so we're up at the top of the New York State Pavilion, up at the observation towers, and a lot of construction still underway. You can see how skeletal the US Pavilion is. Other things are barely taking shape up there. It must have been just great to go up there and look. Kodak has its first pictures put up. They were smart. They put the first pictures up facing the freeway so that people could start getting excited about it. And these are all, again, just shots taken up from, this was about 6 months before the opening of the fair. Down on the ground, later in this one, the U.S. is looking a lot better. China's coming along. One of the fountains. Mormon Pavilion. But we're going to go back up top, and we're going to get some nice views of showing you how you put a roof on the pavilion. Again, Tower of the Four Winds. We'll get there. There are a whole bunch of these. Again, more on Thailand. Coke. U.S. Rubber, they had covered over the name Uniroyal because that was going to be unveiled after the fair opened, but they wanted it built on there so they didn't have to redo it. but they didn't want to spoil their giant Uniroyal name, so they covered it over with a tarp until the corporate unveiling. General Motors. Wouldn't you have loved to have been up there getting these views? The Heliports Open was one of the first pavilions open at the fair, and they were obviously flying the helicopters in and out, getting ready for the big day. This is kind of interesting. They had just delivered the Sinclair dinosaurs. Some of them were intact, but the others were so big you had to deliver them in sections. So they've been brought in on the barge that came down the Hudson from the Jonas studios. And you have tails of dinosaurs, heads of dinosaurs, all pieces of dinosaurs. Mr. T-Rex in 2 parts. And they've started putting them out on site, putting them back together. The Brontosaurus up on the roof. And these, I think, people are going to really enjoy. The New York State Pavilion, the roof, the metal work was built on the ground, and then it was lifted through hydraulic jacks that went up the length of the precast columns here from the background. The columns have concrete openings in the concrete or cement, so my roommate doesn't harass me about it. They have openings in the tower that they would periodically put steel beams that would go out, and they would jack up the metal rim of the Tent of Tomorrow, and then put it out there to rest on those things, get the jacks ready, lift it up to the next level. So here's the roof down on the ground, all sorts of work getting ready to bring it in and raise it up. Massive construction job. This is in the center of it. That's the torsion ring. If you go there today, you can see all those metal fittings that hold the cables that go off to the end. And they're standing smack dab at the center of the roof. And these guys are getting ready to lift it on up. And you sure hope they know what they're doing. So it was lifted again with giant hydraulic jacks that would raise it up. You can see a steel beam coming out from the tower, heading out into the middle of it. They would rest on it, and then they would raise it up another section up again and keep going. So this is all this stuff they had to build to get this thing up and raised up there. Electrical systems, all these things built just for the sole purpose of lifting that up there, that as soon as it was up, it would all be ripped out and thrown away. But it's getting up there, and it's going to be going higher and higher and going up. Again, looking down at from the tower, and you can see pieces of it coming together going up. Obviously, no terrazzo map. The center of it. And they've gotten it up to the top, and now they're starting the job of putting the colored tiles up on it. So eventually they got it done, and you can see the tiles are up, and the plastic is off the towers, and they're ready to go. And if people, I've got one more set of pictures the week before the fair opened that I just came across. People want to see one more set of pictures? Okay, we'll do one more set of pictures. I love Gluttons for Punishment. All right, these were all taken on April 2nd, 1964, so just before the fair opened. Again, these are not my pictures, but somebody was able to share from a French magazine that took them. They came out and took a look just before the fair opened. Again, all April 2nd. So again, just 2-3 weeks before this thing got going, you know, all sorts of stuff, temporary fence. So they put all these fences around to protect the trees from the construction equipment as it went through the site. This pretty much matches the views I had shown in color a few minutes ago from up at the roof of the Port Authority building. We'll just go through some of these. Some of these are sort of self-explanatory. That's the Kodak Pavilion, the Meadow photography store off to the left. Roof is still being fixed on the Vatican. Excuse me. Water is finally into the fountain area. Looks like there's still some debris floating in the middle of it there. They were still doing work getting the escorted drivers trained. They were also, one of the things they were doing is getting ready to film the opening TV special that Albert Fisher worked on. So there are a lot of shots of some of that. Folks upstairs at the Port Authority enjoying a nice cocktail, looks like. Down below, they're putting the facades on the Indonesia Pavilion. Again, these were cast over in Indonesia, brought over here, and then now they're going on to the outer framework of the building. Monorail is getting ready to be taking its tours around. All that scaffolding, 3 weeks to go. If you ever wondered how they got the brass rails, well, they brought in a giant crane, they lifted them up, they put them on the pole, and then they inflated them. Again, we saw that sign earlier, it seems like 2-3 hours ago, the Pool of Industry sign. Now you can see the same sign and how it looks way different than it looked back then. It's no longer a sea of dirt and mud. They had these temporary signs were all across the site because if you were driving a delivery of construction material or you were even told to go work in a building, if there wasn't a sign, it was very small change would actually know where you were going. So they had all these temporary signs for things like the Avenue of Invention. Again, a view from the Port Authority. Tower of Light. The bridge we saw before, there was a sea of dirt that you couldn't get across. They're taking, this is a photo op, they were taking VIPs around the site, but now they're doing it in cars instead of by buses. Danger, liquid propane gas. One of the Pinkertons. World of Food in the background again. Again, 3 weeks before opening day. At this point, Moses is engaged in court battles, getting ready to tear this thing down. Last minute adjustments to the roof. Nice shot of the Tower of the Four Winds. Our Phil has finished his work from his crane. Stop! You cannot take home a souvenir. Simmons Beauty Rest, where all the alcoves were for taking your naps. And again, this is where we saw that microwave tower being lowered and the guy standing inside of it during the construction phase. They have not yet taken down the sign for bell system we saw during the skeletal steel phrase, because again, people may not know where they were going, what they were doing. Almost ready for opening day. I can relax. Again, building a brass rail restaurant. A little more complicated than just throwing balloons up on the roof. And the World of Food, the last of what I think it was going to be seen. Our workmen again putting Indonesia to its final pieces. Hong Kong. I know a lot of people enjoy these, not just for the pictures of the fair buildings, but trying to identify all the cars. One of the entrance pylons. Spain is just getting ready to open. And we're just about done. Tower of Light. And I guess we are done. So that's all I will subject folks to. First person, let's see, the remnants of the jacks are still there. The first person to get me a piece of Palo gets a free dinner. Yeah, Jim says, as though it's going fast, you can replay them. I had a lot of pictures. I ended up, as I went through this, saying, oh, I had the picture of, Andy Warhol's picture painted over. I forgot to throw that in, forgot to throw this in. There were just so many. So appreciate folks sticking with us. We still have 59, so we didn't lose too many. So questions, folks, if you have a question, use the raise your hand feature. It will pop you up to the corner of the screen. I'll see you and can unmute you, or if you frantically wave. Randy Lopes, I see you waving, so you can unmute yourself there. There you go.
Okay, when you were showing the models of the fairgrounds early on, one of them had the original Pavilion of France, and then one had what I believe, it may have been an artist's drawing of the Unisphere, but in the background you could see what I believe was the original US Pavilion, Federal Pavilion, that big kind of an arched structure, circular structure. I'm not sure if that actually was an official design early on or what.
Oh yeah, that was what they were. A lot of these things, like the U.S. Pavilion, went through several design concepts, and I forget who it was that actually came up with the initial design. But they had a lot of times you had to have a placeholder that if they had not decided what they were going to do, you couldn't just leave a big sign saying "Pavilion to be built." So they would come up with some sort of design mock-up or concept, try to get funding, and that's how some of them changed so much. Even the ones that ended up getting really downscaled, you have to put something in place. So aim for this, the moon, shoot for it, try to get something built, and then see what your budget can actually go. But yes, on some of them they changed the designs. Like you saw for DuPont, zero similarity between the first design, the second design, and the way it was actually built. But those were all things that were seriously considering at some point in time.
Yeah, the Pavilion of France. I think in your collection, in your online collection, the original design, I think actually did groundbreaking for it. It was kind of up near where Spain was located. It had that kind of pyramid and oval and square. One was, I guess, Maxime's of Paris restaurant.
Right.
I guess that the French government at that point was actually involved in it.
They were, and then they got into the big BIE battle about, if you build one there, we'll never let you have another World's Fair again. And they decided to pull out. Maybe the BIE went to take the Eiffel Tower back or something. I don't know. But yeah, there were all sorts of things that came and went. Excuse me. As I was putting this together last night, I kept coming across more and more things or designs. If you ever want to see a lot of things that were not built, go to the progress reports that the Fair Corporation put out, and there's all sorts of artwork and concept stuff. Shameless plug, my second book has a bunch of these pictures and a bunch of others for things that were planned but never built as well. So Bill Young and I had a lot of fun going through the Fair Corporation files and trying to pick out things that we thought would be of interest. And again, things that some of them would have been really hard to build. Some of the early concept of theme structures. So glad we got the Unisphere and not that UFO-looking design they had talked about. And it was another one that was a big, basically cylinder, sort of tower with water pouring down. Wouldn't have been interesting at all. So you look at it and you go, they made some really good choices over the years. And in hindsight, thank goodness that they did.
Yeah, that Galaxon or whatever it was called.
Yeah, Galacton, yeah, Galaxion, I think it was, yeah. Right.
Do you know if the moon roof on the Travel and Transportation building was finished on opening day?
It was not. It was finished in terms of physical construction. It wasn't finished being painted. So I actually have pictures of the first week of the fair where you can see down below it's green and up above it's still brown and wood and stuff. And guys up there, and I joke about people, saying, "Oh, Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man on the moon," and there's guys up there frantically painting it. But it was not finished in time for the opening of the fair. So
I'd love to see you do. I'm sorry, I'd love to see you do a presentation on you had a lot of it at the beginning of planned pavilions and actual pavilions. Years ago, I actually found, I lost it when my computer crashed, my first computer, rendering of the USSR pavilion. And I cannot find it online. I just was surfing one day and I found it was the original design for the Soviet pavilion at Expo 70 in Osaka, which ended up being very similar, just it was oriented differently on the site. But there was actually also a picture of the New York World's Fair Soviet pavilion, and also, oh, you're green again, and also, oh shoot, it was something else. Oh, also some very preliminary sketches of the 1967 Moscow World's Fair that ended up in Montreal.
Yeah, I think the only picture I have of the planned USSR one for the 64 fair is a small one inside one of the progress reports. I don't think I had anything else. I was lucky to get a lot of the pictures of, like, Harper Goff's artwork and some of the other concept stuff. There was a woman who had been a secretary in the publicity department, and she worked at the fair in 64 and 65.
It's all green again.
Oh, I'm all green? Yeah, look at that. I'm all green.
That's what happened before.
It's funny, on my picture here, I look fine. I don't know why I look all green.
I don't know what happened.
Here,
You're good.
Was it took the scratch off?
oh, good. Took the scratch off? Okay. I don't know. Hit my camera and I'm not green. Yeah, this woman had saved all the stuff when she cleaned out her desk. She took it and moved upstate to Albany, New York, and had it all sitting in a garage for years and years and years. And then came across it and said, hey, do you have any interest in this? And we negotiated for about 6 months, and I finally was able to get it. But being in the publicity department, she had all these wonderful, great stills, a lot of the aerial photographs and stuff. The Fair Corporation was just throwing them out, particularly stuff, planned pavilions that we never built. Who cares? And I was just thrilled to get it.
Yeah, I just one more thing, Bill, if I could. I'm in the process. I'm emailing back and forth with somebody at the New York Public Library, the Robert Moses collection. In the book, Remembering the Future, there's a tiny map of Robert Moses' confidential space allocation plan, very early. And unfortunately, the printing process is not much better than dot matrix. And it's difficult to make out, what's there, but I've made out a few of them, but he's trying to find that in the collection. Having worked for the airlines, I find it interesting that at the base of the Port Authority building, Moses wanted all the airlines of the world to have exhibits. And if I get my magnifying glass out and look at that dot matrix map, I could see like BOAC, which of course became British Airways, TWA, Pan Am, mostly the international airlines, Lufthansa. But I'm hoping to get that map at some point. I don't know if you may have a copy of it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that one. I have taken the magnifying glass. Matter of fact, a lot of times, so many things come up. I just keep it right here in my desk drawer. It's fascinating to go through and just see what was supposed to be there, and how things got moved around. Yeah, we're straight lines things alike. Yeah. But it's truly amazing. And then you see the way some things morphed. I mean, there's certain times there's a pavilion that's there, then it's gone, then it's back again. Now it's over here. Now it's over here. And how things change around. So and again, I didn't put everything in here. There were all sorts of pavilions. The Century Pavilion was going to be a showcase for 100 of America's best countries. There were all sorts of different pavilions that were all on there. I did not take the progress report pictures are so small. I did not take any of those and try to blow them up. And again, you can find those on the progress reports online and look at them. But fascinating reading to see how many companies. Great plans. We're coming to the World's Fair. Gone. Never heard from again between one issue and the next.
Yeah.
Great, Joey. You had your hand up. Let me. You should be able to unmute. Still there, Joey?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I have two questions for Jim Brown, if Jim's still here.
Jim's there.
Hi, Jim. Jim, you said that the foundations for the House of Good Taste are still
Yeah,
behind.
if you go behind when you come down the ramp at the main entrance, off to the
Right.
left where the pavilion was, there's some tennis courts over there. Go behind those tennis courts, there's a little snack stand that's part of the golf course. Over near the back fence of that tennis court, there's foundations popping up that are curvy like the shape of that building. But just do be careful there. Don't do it when that woman there and the man that run that thing. I took a few people back there to look at those foundations, and those people came out like Pinkertons and attacked us like, get out of here, get out of here. So go back there like when they're closed, and you'll see those, when that snack stand is closed, and you'll see the foundations back there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Cliff just said that's our next destination when the World Ferris gathering gets back to the park. So
All
yeah,
right.
I'll definitely check
You
that
have
out.
that
Jim.
group, so be careful back there because the people who run that golf course,
And the other question, I think I had asked this once before. The travel and transportation section had a lot of water elements. The Chrysler had the water. They had a lot of fountains and pools. Is the water element the same water element that they use now for the zoo?
No, it's different. In a little feature I did a while back, I drew a lot of comparisons between things that are there now and what were there in a symbolic way. But no, that thing where the seals or the sharks are, or dolphins, whatever, that's sort of in the vicinity of it. But none of those water treatments are actually original. They're actually in the dirt, and it's a part of the habitats for the animals. There's crocodiles and all kinds of stuff, but none of it's actual original basins.
You'll see next week in the pictures of the demolition. After that, it was just flat ground. There's no contouring of any of the hills or anything that in the zoo today. They just bulldozed it all, and it's flat as a pancake.
Wow. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Sure. We have Bill Troop. If you would unmute yourself, Mr. Troop. Mr. Troop's going to tell us the difference between cement and concrete.
No, I was just going to tell you that you place concrete, you don't pour it. But a great presentation. A couple of questions. One is, are there any buildings still there from the 1939 fair?
Yeah, the New York City Pavilion, which was the New York City Pavilion, both for the 39 and 64 fair. It's now the Queens Museum. So that's still there. There's some other bits and pieces, like I mentioned, the boathouse that was back behind the Santa Maria, the picture when they were sitting up there on blocks. That's still there. There's some bridges and stuff. Are there any other real buildings, guys, that I'm missing? They tore down the amphitheater. No other buildings, are there? From 30, yeah, Jim, you can unmute there.
It's not a building, but the rocket thrower. Oh, wait, no, that wasn't. But the cement curved stuff around the rocket thrower is original from 39. There are some remnants around.
Yeah, I mean,
walkways, time capsule, obviously.
But the New York City Pavilion is the only building per se, and in the boathouse.
That's the one that had the big map on the floor, wasn't it?
The diorama, the giant model.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's still there. You can go and visit that today. So I tell you what, when we go to Ontario in September, how you and Carlos and a couple of us can meet. We can do the fair site and then Ontario on the same trip.
Yeah, I want to go back and annoy those people behind that snack stand. That seems like a good thing to do. The second thing is, what do you know who was the project management company that sort of oversaw the whole thing on behalf of the World's Fair Corporation? There must have been some.
The guy, General Potter, that I mentioned, was a fellow that was the overall master construction guy for the whole thing. So the Fair Corporation, he did it, and he had worked on, I believe it was the Panama Canal.
Yeah, I think he was a military guy. Yeah. Right. I was wondering who they worked for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the third one is, you alluded to financial problems several times during this presentation. Have you ever given a presentation on just the financial problems of the World's Fair? I mean, it would be fascinating to just hear, you know, from the beginning, how they sort of piled up and how they were resolved. Probably not a lot of pictures that go with it, but it sounds like a very interesting story.
Yeah, something we could talk about. Not a lot of pictures unless we had a sea of red ink, but yeah, it was definitely, you know, one of the things they totally overdid. And we talk about it every World's Fair. Absolutely overpredict how many people are going to come into to the World's Fair, and then budget accordingly. And one of the big things that New York made a mistake for in this particular fair, they planned for 2 years of the fair. They went off and sold a whole bunch of pre-admission tickets and everything. And then they spent all the money in 64, not realizing that, hey, some of those people that bought tickets are still going to come in 65. So all of a sudden you front loaded all your expenses, and now you have the, you know, no income coming in down the road. So that, and they had not only got less people than they expected, but they had spent money. I mean, they were very lavish. If you go through the World's Fair Corporation files, they put out press releases on everything. If Robert Moses had a cheeseburger and burped, they put out a fancy booklet, you know, that they would distribute thousands of copies of this thing. And Moses, he got in all sorts of wars, you know, with the BIE and all these other things, and he put out all these booklets, and they printed them out and they mailed them out. They mailed out everything to everybody, and all of a sudden, you know, they realized, my God, we're spending a fortune. So they made a giant effort to cut back on some of the PR expenses. But in 63 and early 64, they were spending money like drunken sailors.
Wow. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Who else? You okay? Okay, Wayne, I see you waving there.
Yeah, I was wondering about any details of how some of the pavilions were started up. Like, for example, Equitable had that population counter. They didn't have the internet for somebody to go and say, what's the population today? So, and did they have a ceremony, or did somebody in charge just say, oh, here's the number, and the night before he budgeted it in?
Well, I've mentioned before, with Equitable, I thought at the time there was somebody on the phone, like to every hospital, that, oh, Mrs. Jones just had a baby, and they bumped the number up. Oh my God, it was twins. They bump it up too. We just lost the Smith family, drop it down. All they had done back at that point in time was go through, you know, they were insurance people. So there were actuarial numbers. They had an idea of what the population was in the United States. It grows at roughly X amount of people per you know, day, and they just divided that and just started pumping the numbers up there. You know, whether or not, you know, it'd be interesting to know, that they slow the numbers down at night because less babies are born in the middle of the night than they were during the day, or they just every, you know, 13.7 seconds or whatever, you know, add a number in. But yeah, back at the time, I mean, I was as a kid convinced that that was the actual number of people. And you know, I was thinking, and I remember standing there as a 12-year-old watching and realizing it never went down. You know, it wasn't like, oh, it was just a car crash and we have to drop the number down. It always just went up. So, you know, technology, you know, it's all what you can sell to everybody. I'd just like to ask my fellow Disney fans or workers that are on the call, can you imagine if you had to build something like Epcot and there was nobody in charge of the construction? You know, everything was being done by different companies with different timetables, all working at different projects. And then, wait, that was pretty much the way the Disney thing was, wasn't it? If you were working on the Land Pavilion, you didn't give a fig about what the guys were doing over at American Adventure. You just wanted your pavilion done on time. But I imagine the logistics of coordinating just who got the truck permits and could haul in concrete one day and haul in steel on another day. The construction crews for the World's Fair Potters organization just had to do an incredible job of scheduling to get that all done. Glenn.
Yeah, well, in our case, Rich and I were doing audio and video, so we had every single pavilion in the place to deal with. But you're right, there was a lot of that. And one of the things I really noticed was just the radio traffic, because we had regular radios that could talk to each other, but then they had a thing they called simplex, which was like a private line.
Mhm.
And one guy in particular got on that, and he like, this is mine. It's like a hummingbird at a hummingbird feeder. So everything that went for his pavilion went through that simplex, and you could turn onto that and hear them all times of day and night dealing with issues and problems. But it was
Right.
pretty crazy.
It's funny, we still use Simplex for the LAPD. So we have our radios that go all over the valley. You can talk to everybody, or you can say, take it to Simplex if you just want to have a private chat. Not that anything's private. I can
Right.
still remember for Epcot, though, the week before opening, one guy with this look on his face, he had gotten all his landscaping and everything put in place and all the sod was and everything. And he came back the next day and it was all gone because somebody decided they needed to put a conduit through the middle of it. It was just the look on the guy's face, because he had no more budget, no more time. How am I going to get this thing done? And he had no more guarantee that somebody else was going to put a conduit through it the next night as well.
Well, some mornings you'd look over the place and there'd be concrete that had been poured with a bunch of footprints right across it because somebody didn't know. So they'd have to do it again.
Now, okay, Wayne's.
Yeah, looking at the progress on the Carousel of Progress reminded me of when I've been involved in trade shows, and they are always the same way. It's like the day before you think this will never be done, and then by 5 p.m. somehow it gets put together and you get out of the way and the carpet people come in, and the next morning you would think it had been there for a year.
Yeah, I mean, everything's controlled chaos. I mean, it's, I would think that, oh, we want to get the World's Fair open, let's be ready the week before, but then you're paying for everything to sit there for weekend use. Everything's just on time. Cliff was mentioning in the note that one of William Potter's assistant was an engineer named William Whipple. If you ever get a chance to look at the World's Fair Corporation folders, Whipple was a real no-nonsense guy, and he wrote some real stern memos to people about, you better get this done or I'll tear it down, sort of thing. So if you talk about somebody wielding a whip and making sure that this thing got built on time, Whipple was, again, one of the unsung heroes of getting this fair built. I mean, it's a tremendous job, and I hope that came across with so many of the pictures, just the physical size of some of these buildings, but, having to build the infrastructure. And somebody did ask, is the infrastructure still there? Yeah, for the most part, the 64 World's Fair had the exact same problem that the 39 World's Fair had. Ran out of money, couldn't turn it into a park to rival Central Park. So most of the, the pipes are still in the ground, the electrical is still in the ground, the water, the gas lines are still in the ground. A lot of the stuff's capped off, at the gas lines, that sort of thing, not in use. But, in recent years, they've finally torn out some of the sidewalks to put more green space into the park. But for years, there were just sidewalks and, things off to nowhere all throughout the place. Joey, you had your hand back up.
Hi, Ken Carpenter just asked me a question. There's supposed to be a remnant of a foundation over by the subway gate. I'm thinking over by Passerelle. So maybe Jim Brown could answer that for us.
Let me unmute Jim here.
Yeah, a little while ago, I don't know if you were on at the moment, but I was talking about the World of Foods. The foundation is near the main entrance. Yeah. There might be other stuff over there, but that's what I was referring to, World of Foods.
So Ken, it's the World of Food that's over there. The remnants of the the concrete, I guess. And Bill, it's very funny.
A little bit.
Right. I'll go over and check it out, Jim.
Right. Bring your armor with you. That woman's nasty.
I'll have to, yeah, I'll wear a hard hat. It's funny, Bill, every time you mentioned General Potter, I keep thinking you're saying Colonel Potter, and I'm looking for Harry Morgan.
No, you know, it was interesting. So many of these people ended up becoming big guys for building Disney World because, you know, Walt ran into them, and, you know, that's where he started hiring some of these people to get the Disney World project. I got a kick out of here. Glenn Walker mentions a population counter at the entrance to Toontown. Yeah, that's about as scientifically accurate, Glenn, is the one that they had at the, at Equitable. Jim?
Yeah, I just want to make clear the snack stand is the one behind the tennis courts, not the one out near Gotham Plaza. Those people are very nice. The Chinese people that run that. It's not them. Don't blame them. It's a small snack stand behind the tennis courts where the golf pitch and putt court is. Pitch and putt course.
Mitch in the chat mentioned that the General Food arches were probably done in zinc chromate primer, so you learned something new. I think they would have looked nice as yellow myself. They would have stood out more. But you know, that's one of the things I enjoy about these talks is, you know, I learn stuff just like everybody else from people that have different pieces of knowledge or interest in it. So appreciate that. So hopefully, Irv, you're waving there. Hopefully your connection held up for you. I saw you come and go a couple times.
Yeah, there you go. I got to say today's presentation is probably the most interesting one you've done so far. But you got to look back at all these photos. When you look at the construction of the big buildings like the United States Pavilion and General Motors and General Electric, the amount of heavy duty concrete and steel that went into that thing, they couldn't have made it more permanent than if they tried. And the people building that thing had to realize in just 18 months, it's all going to be torn down again. It must have been disheartening to work on it. And then especially the pictures of the interior construction of the General Electric building, all those guys doing so much detail work, knowing it's only going to be there for another year. Didn't they try to take any shortcuts with the intention that it's all going to be removed very shortly?
Well, they had a building code that they had to obey. It was a reduced building code for the city of New York. So you basically didn't have to winterize your building as much. You had to make sure that they weren't going to fall down in a hurricane. And you had to make sure that, you know, things like emergency exits and emergency exit lighting, all those things had to be done. But you didn't have to build a building to make it last. Now you look at some of these buildings like the GM Pavilion, you know, that giant basement they built for it. I mean, the concrete, the rebar, everything they were putting in there, that thing looked like it was going to be built. As a matter of fact, that a lot of that is still supposed to be down in the ground, that when they tore down the rest of the pavilion, they threw stuff in the basement there, filled that in with dirt. They had to cut it out to 4 feet below ground level, but they didn't have to take out all the rest of it. So a lot of those concrete walls and everything are still going to be down, you know, down below there. But that's how Expo 67 was able to survive too. They built it, and the buildings, you know, they couldn't use them for winter. But if you do have to build it strong enough to survive a hurricane, you might as well just keep it going. I asked somebody one time that had worked on building one of the buildings, and he ended up working also tearing it down. And I said, you know, did it hurt, you know, to build all that time and effort, and then 2 years later to come back and tear it all down? And he said, no, they put a swimming pool in my backyard. And to him, that's all it was, yeah, it was a job. Come in, build it, tear it down. You know, I don't care. You know, it was just, you weld this, you weld that. It didn't matter. It was how many dollars per hour you made, and it was, you know, it was just a job.
You were talking about the basement of General Motors. I heard one of the motives of that basement was to provide a burial site for the debris when they tore it down. And it sounds like that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, a lot of the buildings had big basements that just threw stuff in there because you had to fill that hole up. I mean, something had to go into that hole. And if you know, you'd either have to go buy dirt from someplace, pay more money and bring it in, or you say to somebody else, hey, take the steel or the concrete or whatever from your building, throw it in my hole and we'll fill it up, which is again what I do believe happened to the underground world home. That it's not sitting there intact, but it wasn't totally. The guy didn't have the money to tear out the entire thing. So if you only had to tear out the top 4 feet of it, you tear that out and then you move on.
It's no worse than burying all those cans and bottles there from the landfill.
It wasn't that good. Some picture that came from the woman I got from upstate New York from the early construction. And when you look into it, I find myself with my magnifying glass trying to look to see if I can make out, was it a can of this or a can of that? It's just rusted, junked up metal. But that's what's so much. If you were to dig a hole somewhere in Flushing Meadows, you would come up with that sort of stuff. And that's why you have things like the subsiding dirt over in the lake amusement area. They poured so much of that stuff in, built the fair, and then all that metal rusts away over time. The metal rusts away, the ground subsides, and all of a sudden the monorail pylons look like they're popping up. They're not popping up. The rest of the ground is going down. Now it's weird. I see on my other laptop here, my picture just went green again, but it looks okay on. How many people see a green, Bill?
You're perfect. Perfect.
And other people see it fine. It's really bizarre. I have no idea why it's doing that. So I'm going to turn off green, Bill. I have no idea why it does that. So still green? Oh, sing the Rainbow Connection. No, Don, if I were to sing, we would go from 48 people to 1 real quick. I actually go to 0 because I wouldn't even want to hear it myself. So next week, anybody else, any thoughts on the construction or pieces of it? Randy, I see you got your hand up.
Actually, this is a little bit off. Oops.
Yeah.
Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
okay,
hear
good. A little bit off topic. You were showing one of the early renderings of the Unisphere had that conveyor system.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've seen the stuff that I posted about the World's Fair that was supposed to be held in Long Beach in 1966 over at the Peace Through Understanding website. That was going to be the primary transportation for that fair, was going to be conveyors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, there must have been some company, kind of like AMF did monorail at
Right.
New York. Yeah, must have been some company trying to push their transportation system, I guess. But that was going to be all throughout the grounds, not just one line.
Yeah.
So it was going to be pretty extensive. Yeah.
It was sort of like the people mover at Disneyland and Disney World, making a loop around the whole area. Yeah, there were so many things that were proposed. It was a giant arch that was going to be the Arch of the Americas that was never built. I mean, that's the stuff. I mean, I could have filled up an hour just on stuff they planned to do and they never did. That's why, originally I was going to do the construction and the demolition. But as I got more and more into it, I said, oh, this is too cool to pass up. But a lot of these companies put a lot of money into, I mean, some of the things are pretty easy. Do a sketch of a tire, shaped like a Ferris wheel or whatever. Others, they went into real details as far as engineering schedules and budgets and plans. And, in the Carveyor particular case, they lost out the Goodyear's, Greyhound being the official transportation system. So that's why they, didn't get it done. But they had quite an ambitious project that came quite far along the way. Well, I appreciate folks joining us. Next week, we're going to see everything we saw built this week torn down. Luckily, I don't have as many pictures of the demolition. Oh, Ken's got his hand up. Let me unmute Ken.
Yeah, Bill, I just wanted to follow up with Jim one more time on the World of Food. I put a background up on my screen here. Hopefully you can see that okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the tennis courts at the bottom center of the picture are the ones he's talking about, where World of Food is. It'd be to the upper right of those, as opposed to the courts that are higher up on the picture. And there is some kind of building on the very top corner of those lower courts. I'm wondering if that's the snack house you say.
Let me look in close on that. Yeah, Okay, you see that road that kind of curves from the middle of the picture to the upper right-hand corner?
Right.
Yeah, upper right. There's some trees along there. It's hard to see, but among those trees there's a little building, a tiny little black box there. That's the building. You go in there, there's like a walkway in, there's a fence. You have to go around the fence and into that snack bar area, then follow over towards the tennis court. And you'll see it there. You'll see the foundation popping up.
Okay, thanks.
No, if you come down the ramp, you're to the circle, you come down that ramp and you make a hard left right near the doors to the bathrooms. You make that hard left and you take that road going up there, which originally went past the House of Good Taste. You'll pass that, then look to the right. You'll see a little building there.
Yeah, you can see that one. I don't know if my talking brings it up full screen, but if you have the Google image on full screen, you can actually see the building.
Yeah. If I go into speaker view, no, I see myself.
Yeah, I'll keep talking now. But yeah, see, it's sort of top right center. You can spot it. Looks like it has a little clear dome on the top of it.
Yes, that's it. That's the building. So just go like to the back side of the building where the actual window is to order the food, and then look out towards the tennis courts. You'll see there's a curved area, like a curved concrete footing there.
Okay, very cool.
And it's popping up pretty high.
And Joey, somebody wants to know what you're holding.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I don't know what it is, but it's from the US Pavilion, and it's just a little sneak peek for next week's show. There you go.
Okay. And Ali mentioned that will I provide somebody else? Will I provide Kleenex for next week's demolition? No, we'll just stay. I'll put the pictures out. I won't go as quite as fast, so people have time to wipe their tears. So Ali, thank you for the donation you sent me this week. Appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying the book. So thank you. Yeah, again, shameless plug. If you do want more about the building of the fair and also where the fair pieces went, the first book we did was a general tour of the fair. Yeah, she's holding up the one with the dinosaurs on the cover. The second one is the creation, and then the dispersal of the fair, and then the third one was the color book on again, a general tour. But next week's going to be bittersweet, and we can see it torn down and pieces going places. And I mentioned just like on the 39 fair, they left things like the star pylon up so you could figure out where you were in the debris field, and that's exactly what happened in the 64 fair. If there was a tower, they left it standing so that when you were driving in your truck to pick up 12 tons of debris from the so and such pavilion, you could find it by driving around. So you'll see a sign for Formica, the house of the Formica House of the Future, and there's nothing but garbage in everywhere you look, concrete and cement or whatever the difference is between the two of them, and the Formica sign sitting out in front, and that was the only way to even tell where the things used to be. So it's sad, but it was always planned to be that way. Again, to build a park, build a fair, raise the money, build a park, and we'll come full circle next week. By the way, about 3 weeks from now, we're going to have talk by a fellow that has been he worked at the fair grounds afterwards and parked the little yellow elevator on the side of the tower and was up on the roof running around during the ice skating, the roller skating days of it. So somebody's going to be talking about where the remnants of the 1939 1939 San Francisco World's Fair went. She's actually giving that same talk to a different audience right now, but is going to be joining us for the future going ahead. So again, I was looking at the schedule last night. It's almost been a year. It's hard to believe, a year since started. So I appreciate those folks that have joined with us and haven't run out of topics yet. The list is getting smaller, but again, as I mentioned before, if there's things that people would really like to talk about that you have a theme park, a World's Fair, something I don't have the information on. Like Randy, are you going to take us to Expo 70 someday?
Someday, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of pictures of it, but I don't know it real well. So I could show pictures and say, look at the pretty pictures, but somebody that knows it better like you do than I do, I'd love to hear your insight to all the things I don't know.
That would be great. Yeah.
So again, hope everybody, how's everybody doing with their vaccination shots? I got 2.
I get my second one tomorrow.
Great. You know, I tell you, I don't know about for anybody else. I went back out on patrol yesterday, and it felt so strange to be back out in public. You know, and you know, like one guy came walking up to ask, you know, he went to ask, he got a ticket, and what did he do about it? And it was like, sir, step back, put your mask on. But I could actually talk to people in public again. So it was just so strange not to be. I mean, because Carol and I hardly ever leave the house, hardly ever go anywhere. And to be driving around and doing things again, it felt really neat, invigorating. So,
Yeah, but you got to remember, you can still be a carrier of it, even if you can't catch it.
yeah, well, I'd say to be a carrier, you'd have to go someplace. And Carol and I, we don't go anywhere. And even like at the station yesterday, you know, everybody's wearing a mask, people being real careful, and we have a real, you know, safety protocol for, you know, wiping down. We go through Clorox wipes, you know, like most people go through with a 1-month-old. I mean, you wipe down the car, the keys, the radios, your equipment belt, you know, everything gets wiped down. So you're driving around and go, it's really nice to smell like Clorox for the first half hour, but we are very, very careful on what we're doing with that.
Can you imagine if the pandemic hit at the opening day of the World's Fair? What a financial disaster that would have been.
Yeah, just go ask the guys in Dubai.
Yeah, Expo 2020, yeah.
Yeah, what if you build a World's Fair and nobody came, you know? And I don't know how many people, even they're hoping to do 2021. I don't know how many people are going to go, because international travel, I think, is going to be a shadow of itself for the longest period of time. So,
you know, I always thought the fact that they built all this along a major highway, all those people driving by, it didn't pique more of their interest to want to go in and actually see it when it opened. It would have, that's like the ultimate advertisement. You can watch it being built on your commute every day.
you know, part of what happened with the fair in that regard is, you know, everybody was like, don't go, it's going to be too crowded. You know, everybody's going to go, so nobody goes, you know, one of those particular things. Then you also had the situation where people did start going and it did get crowded, so nobody went. So some days I've got pictures of it where you couldn't even swear there was concrete down below because everybody's just shoulder to shoulder. Others, it's like, where is everybody? I mean, it was so cyclical how people would come and go to it. But big part of the thing back then is, you know, you build it. The press wasn't real kind to the '64 World's Fair. I mean, Robert Moses, being a bit of an elitist, went out of his way to pick battles with everybody, and the press paid him back for it. So some fairly scathing articles as far as, you know, the terrible architecture, you know, that sort of thing. Now, when people went and they saw, you know, Mr. Lincoln or, you know, I think for, you know, Ford, GM, you know, I mean, the big shows, everybody wanted to see them. But for a lot of people, it sounds silly that $2, wow, I mean, that was expensive. Back then, if you had a family of, you know, like my case, we had 5 boys in the family. It was a big ordeal for my folks to, you know, save up the money, take us all in, because everybody wanted a hot dog, everybody wanted a hamburger, everybody wanted a hat with a feather on it. So it seems quaint today. Oh, $2, you know, but you know,
maybe it was Robert Moses' happy, smiling face that chased him away.
Yeah,
he was the face of the fair, and you'd never see the guy smile.
No, I don't think I don't think Moses enjoyed much in life. He certainly was a stick in the mud. He enjoyed Guy Lombardo. Maybe he smiled for that.
Was he married?
He got married years and years after the fair to his secretary from the fair.
Oh,
yep. And she ended up with all his collection of stuff and dispersed it a few years ago, and people ended up with some really neat memorabilia. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to read the book, The Power Broker, he's a very interesting individual. And again, he's got flaws. He's got buckets of flaws. But if you didn't have him, you wouldn't have had the '64 World's Fair. So to me, I overlook those, flaws or traits or whatever, because it took a real tyrant to get something like that thing done. Can you imagine in today's environment trying to build anything like the '64 World's Fair?
You'd never
Yeah.
get the funding for it.
No, and then you live in a world, where now you can have Mr. Potato Head because that offends people. I mean, think about how many things at the fair would offend people. Greg, you had your hand up? Mr. Airbar? Okay, I guess he changed his mind. Well, again, thanks everybody for joining us. And next week we'll see it all come back down and we'll see how much of it Joey's got in his garage.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Bill. That was great.
Great job.
Very good.
Bye.
Bye-bye.